let's review InJustice, Gods Among Us. In another dimension, the destruction of Metropolis spurs Superman to rule the world as judge, jury, and executioner. Batman, who leads a resistance against him, calls forth heroes from Earth-1 to aid him. But can they turn the tide in this desperate struggle for freedom?
You're not wanted here.
I may not be wanted, but I'm clearly needed.
Hi there, it's me the Jonin Monkey again, once again reviewing the best of the worst of video game storytelling. I'll be honest, I had low expectations of InJustice when I first saw it. I was getting tired of the whole dark reimaginings of superheroes at the best of times, and the fact that the premise had shades of other stories like Kingdom Come and Justice Lords only served to put me off. But eventually I shrugged off my pessimism and gave the story mode of this game a try. And honestly, it was a pleasant surprise. I was expecting something similar to NeverRealm Studios' last superhero effort, Mortal Kombat vs DCU, where the heroes mostly spoke in exposition and the plot was a series of weak excuses for uninteresting fights. But InJustice is a great improvement from those days. The plot flows naturally and every fight has a fairly good reason for happening, and on top of that, it works really well with the gameplay. There's no pause between the story and the action. We start a conversation, pan straight into the fight, and then resume the story with no interruptions, save for the occasional mini-game that deals out handicaps. It's a great system that blurs the barriers between cutscenes and gameplay whilst maintaining the story's momentum. In fact, my only critique of this system may be that it works too well at times, since I always felt bad about shutting the game off when I had to get back to work. It was like interrupting a singer mid-song. It just felt awkward. The characters are not exactly three-dimensional, but they are at least written as sensible people with their own motivations and ways of doing things. They could have easily written off the regime versions of the characters as, oh, they're all mad and thus evil now. But the game makes the effort to explain why each alternate hero has joined this version of Superman. And the regular heroes, whilst making some silly mistakes here and there, do come across as experienced warriors who know how to get their jobs done. Hell, if you want proof that they're used to this kind of thing, just look at their reaction when they enter the new dimension.
So, temporal displacement? Alternate Earth?
Could be either. We may have jumped to a different dimension. Or events in our own timeline have changed, and we're in a new, altered present.
But, as is the case with most DC stories, the most interesting characterization goes to Batman and Superman. Or to be more precise, their alternate counterparts. After watching the people he once knew and respected becoming madmen, Batman has now become a bitter and somewhat paranoid man, determined to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders and becoming very judgmental of the other heroes.
I'm sorry, Bruce. I joined him to protect you. He said if I helped find you, he'd...
Spare me.
I didn't believe him, but it bought us time. I misdirected him.
Small comfort for the ones who died in my place.
And to say Regime Superman has issues would be an understatement. Whilst the idea of a grief-stricken Superman becoming a dictator has been done before, I still find this version interesting because of one subtle twist in the characterization that manages to set him apart. The way I look at it, his actions are less inspired by grief than they are ego. The Joker defeated him in every possible way, and his loved ones paid the price for it. So Superman dedicated the rest of his life to stamping out that mistake, never holding back, never letting his guard down, always working on new projects and never losing his focus, even when the story dangles scantily clad Wonder Woman in front of him. He would gladly give up all forms of compassion and comfort if it meant he would never make the same mistake again.
I perfected this world. So many lives lost because I held back when I should have used all my power.
For what? To control? To oppress?
I could have prevented Metropolis, saved my family.
Crime took my family too, Clark.
If you weren't the gun...
What appears to send him over the edge in the final act is not just Luthor's betrayal, but his last words telling Superman that he considered his piece a joke. This Superman would rather believe that the fault lies with the ungrateful population, rather than looking at himself and acknowledging the new mistakes he's making. Even his desire to bring another Lois Lane to his dimension seems to be less about repairing his broken heart, and more about having someone with him to acknowledge his work.
After I've killed you, I'll bring Lois here. When she sees how I perfected this world, she'll be afraid and disgusted. She'll be alive! Lois's death doesn't just... He stole her from me! You stole this planet's freedom!
What I'm trying to say is that there are many elements that make InJustice an enjoyable story. One far better than I was expecting from this kind of game. That said, there's one element that prevents InJustice from being a great story rather than simply a good story. And that is its overly serious atmosphere. Note that I said atmosphere, not tone. Whilst there have been some comic book adaptations that took themselves far too seriously for their own good, the writers have no problems with the characters' superpowers, backstories, or even the bizarre comic book science. In fact, they seem to embrace it for the most part. And even when the darker elements creep into the story, the characters are still allowed to crack jokes and stay true to their own moral codes. The writers are not the problem here. No, the problem is that everything else about the game, from the graphics to the sound design to the music, wants to focus on the grim situation and the brutal violence, which I believe is ultimately to its detriment. I could forgive the smaller elements, like the constant dim lighting or the goofy attempts to make the costumes look like armor. Seriously, how are these light trails more realistic than spandex? But I can't forgive the restrained performances the actors have to give, and the bland score which is barely audible most of the time. It drains the life and energy these scenes could have had, and creates this stilted experience where awesome things are happening, but none of the characters seem to care.
Ready, Superman? To take on the might of Atlantis?
Don't act like nothing's happened! He literally threw a tsunami at you! Maybe I'm making too much out of this. I mean, even with the darker atmosphere, the heroes still save the day, and we do end on this great sense of triumph.
The angel of love was upon me, and Lord, I felt so small. The legs beneath me weakened, I began to crawl, confused.
Okay, I get it. You're dark. You're not Adam West Batman. Just stop it. You are trying way too hard now. I'm sorry. It's just disappointing because InJustice is an entertaining story, especially if you're a fan of the DC Universe. Its premise is well thought out, the pacing is great, and the characterization is surprisingly good. But it's held back by this bizarre need to try and sell itself as a darker story, which at best feels unnecessary and at worst just looks ridiculous. In short, it's good, not great, but I still feel it's worth checking out. I've been the Jonin Monkey, and until next time, cheerio!